In our last short presentation, we looked at the assessment staircase that helped us decide what type of an item will assess the various levels of learning in Bloom's taxonomy. This presentation provides us another method. It's called the target method match, to help us best determine the type of assessment that will more or most appropriately measure the student learning that we were aiming for. I've used a variety of terminology so far. We've talked about standards. Some people talk about benchmarks, which are levels of the standards along the way. We may call these objectives, we may call them expectations, goals, indicators, or targets of student learning. This is what we want students to know and be able to do. Once we have our standard or benchmark or target, we've got a lot of different ways that we can go. Follow along as we dissect a simple standard and create appropriate assessments to get at the various components of that standard. Our first standard that we're going to dissect is drives a car with skill. Let's take a second first to look at the difference between standards and targets. The standard is a broad statement that has a set of priorities. Targets guide daily classroom practice. Targets guide assessment decisions. Possible targets can fall into one of four areas. For example, to master content knowledge, to know it outright and know where to find it. Or the second is to use knowledge to reason. The third, demonstrate performance skills. And the last is to create quality products. These are all achievement targets, much more concise than the standard. As always, keywords are going to give you direction. Just like we've talked about, verbs are critical to give us direction. We're going to look at other keywords in our standard for some guidance. In our last presentation, you'll remember the blocks set upon top one another, and in each box were types of verbs. This is just another variation on the theme. If we have knowledge targets, some good verbs that we could use are describe, identify, explain, define. If we're looking at reasoning targets, then verbs could be analyze, compare, synthesize, categorize, interpret, and justify. If there are skill targets within a standard, you may see words like observe, listen, perform, do, question. If there is some product target within the standard, you would see verbs like design, produce, create, develop, make. Our standard drives a car with skill has many different targets in it. So if we look at the knowledge targets in our standard, what do we know? Here are some examples. Again, our standard drives a car with skill. The knowledge targets could be that I need to know the law, understand informal rules of the road, for example, courtesy, identify parts of a car, know the function of each of them, read signs, understand what they mean, understand how road conditions affect the car's performance. These are all knowledge targets that are part of someone's ability to demonstrate that they can drive a car with skill. As we continue to unpack our standard, what are the reasoning targets that are part of our standard? If I'm going to drive a car with skill, some of the reasoning targets that may be included are my ability to analyze road conditions, to compare and contrast this information with knowledge and past experiences, to synthesize information and evaluate options to make a decision on what to do next while I'm driving. Another reasoning target could be evaluate, am I safe, and synthesize the information to take action if needed. Let's keep unpacking. Skill targets. What skill targets are part of our standard? If I'm going to drive a car with skill, some of the skill targets are that I can steer, I can signal, I can back up, I can parallel park, can accelerate, decelerate, and I can perform driving actions smoothly and accurately. These are all the skills that I need to meet the standard. Now this one may be a little bit tricky for our standard if we're looking for product targets. Remember, as you do the target method match, is not every standard will have all 4 levels of targets, but they will have multiple levels of targets. Don't try to have all 4 unless it's appropriate to have all 4. So let's get back to driving a car with skill. Okay, now you know I'm stretching. The standard drives a car with skill. What would the product targets be? An undamaged car? Successfully getting from point A to point B without an accident? I'm not coming up with one, and maybe you've got a better one. But again, this illustrates not all standards will have all 4 target areas, but a good standard will have more than one. This is a simple grid that helps us to do the target method match. Our targets are down the left side, the knowledge, reasoning, performance, and skills. And across the top gives you types of assessment types: selected response, extended written, performance, and personal communication. Again, there are many, many, many types of assessments, but for the target method match, they focus on these 4. Again, to test knowledge, you don't choose all 4 assessment methods, you choose the best. When we're talking selected response, that includes item types such as multiple choice, true, false, matching, fill-in, or short answers. As we continue our definitions, in the extended written response, it's very important to set a specific context so that you are narrowing what you want the student to write about. Another way of doing this is to specify the reasoning. Why are they writing? Why do you want them to pull information together into a written format? As the instructor, you need to point the way to an appropriate response, not give the student answers, but help clarify the context so that the student is targeted into what you want them to respond to. A performance assessment usually involves activities or exercises that the student engages in while the teacher observes and judges the quality. Think about a performance can be like singing and dancing, etc., but it can also be building something, it can be debating something, it can be you describing or demonstrating an experiment. The teacher observes and then uses a set of criteria or a rubric that gives you feedback on your performance. Having that criteria or rubric prior to the assessment is critical. Without it, the student does not have any idea of what pretty looks like, of where they should focus their energy, what will quality look like. Having exemplars are also important so the student knows the direction they should be headed. In the target method match, personal communication includes assessments such as an oral exam, a running record where the student is reading and the teacher is observing. It could be a journal or a log. It could be a response journal. It's where the student and the teacher are communicating with one another in some defined way, such that the teacher can make judgments on student performance. As with performance assessment, you need to have a rubric or pre-established criteria prior to this type of assessment. Okay, let's go back. Remember that our standard is to drive a car with skill. So let's unpack it. First, we said that our knowledge target could be parts of the car, knowing the function of each, etc. So how can we assess the mastery of the knowledge target? This would be good for selected response. We need to know some very defined and concrete skills. If we're looking at our performance skills, our target may be to parallel park or to drive the course, the maneuverability course that you have to do. These would be performance assessments. Somebody's riding with you, marking you on your skill set, and providing you feedback afterwards as to how well you did. Now it's your turn. What I'd like you to do is to develop a simple standard like the one we used. I'd like you to create targets, and then using the grid, establish a target method match. Prepare a test and a plan. And I'd like you to turn to page 219 of your Tests and Measurements book and complete question 5 by developing a table of specifications.